One of the biggest banks in the world helped siphon $2 billion out of one of the poorest countries on earth, and almost nobody noticed. Here's what I keep coming back to. Nobody broke in, nobody hacked anything. It started with a pen. One man, one signature. A finance minister named Manuel Chang, and a promise that would help bankrupt his own country. I'll be honest, when I first read about this, I assumed it was just another corrupt government contract. It isn't. It's so much bigger. So let's do what this channel does best. Let's follow the money and figure out exactly what happened. This is Capital Crimes. We follow the money. The trail runs from a Swiss bank, through a shipyard in the Gulf, all the way to a market in Maputo, to people who never signed a thing. By the end, a minister is in prison, a 160-year-old bank has pleaded guilty, and nearly 2 million people have been pushed into poverty. But it doesn't start with a crime. It starts with the best news Mozambique had heard in 50 years. In 2010, off Mozambique's northern coast, energy giants found one of the largest gas reserves discovered anywhere in a decade. Overnight, one of the poorest nations on earth was sitting on a fortune, trillions of cubic feet of gas, untold billions in future revenue. But for most Mozambicans, that fortune was just a rumor. The future kept being promised, and people like Maria, a trader in a Maputo market, kept waiting for it to arrive. That's the gap at the heart of this. A country rich on paper, poor in the streets. A future everyone could see and nobody could spend yet. A gap like that attracts a certain kind of deal maker. And right on cue, one steps off a private jet. A Gulf shipbuilding group called Privinvest, run by a billionaire industrialist, Iskandar Safa. And Privinvest has a pitch. Protect your new gas fields from pirates. Build a fishing industry, create thousands of jobs. All it takes is a little borrowing. 3 companies, 3 promises. Coastal security, a state tuna fleet, and shipyards to run it all. And here's the detail I love, because it's so clever. The centerpiece wasn't missiles or radar, it was tuna. Think about it. Nobody questions a fishing fleet. Tuna is boring. And boring is the perfect place to hide $2 billion. To pay for it, Mozambique had to borrow enormously, and a poor country can't just borrow billions unless someone guarantees the loan, which is where Chang comes back in. As finance minister, his signature was the state guarantee, the taxpayers on the hook if it all fell apart. By law, a guarantee this big was supposed to go through Parliament, public, debated, voted on. Remember that, it matters later. It never did. And to move money on this scale in the shadows, you need more than a willing minister. You need a bank. Which brings us to Credit Suisse. Founded in 1856, one of the most respected names in global finance, and the engine of this entire scheme. And this is the genius of the whole scheme. Nobody involved had to believe they were committing a crime. Everyone could tell themselves they were just doing their job. A visionary plan, a willing minister, a global bank. On the surface, a development dream. Now let's look under the surface. Between 2013 and 2014, Credit Suisse and Russia's VTB Bank arranged loans to those 3 companies. The headline number, around $2 billion. To a country Mozambique's size, that wasn't a loan. It was a staggering slice of the whole economy, dropped onto its shoulders overnight. In Zurich, the paperwork was moving. In Maputo, life was not. The 2 worlds hadn't collided yet, but they were bound together now by a signature. So let's actually follow the money, because this is where it gets strange. The first loan, in 2013, was the tuna bond. About $850 million. Investors were told they were funding boats and nets. A fishing company. Simple. And for a while, that's all anyone thought this was. But dig into the deal, and the price doesn't add up. US prosecutors would later say Privinvest's equipment was massively overpriced, and that overcharge wasn't an accident. According to the Justice Department, it created a secret pool of cash, around $200 million, for bribes and kickbacks. Some went to the bankers running the deal. One, Andrew Pierce, later admitted pocketing around $45 million himself. The referee was on the take. Now take a breath, because here's the thing. At this point, most people still had no idea there was a second game being played. So far, this looked like one crooked loan. Bad, but containable. That's what I thought too. And then investigators found another loan, then another. 2 more loans, Pro Indicus and MAM, over $1 billion more. And unlike the tuna bond, these were never shown to investors, the public, or Parliament. Suddenly the number isn't 850 million, it's over $2 billion. And most of Mozambique's own government had no idea it existed. So how do you hide $1 billion of national debt? You keep it off the books. You don't tell the IMF. You don't tell the donors funding your hospitals. And the boats were real. I want to be fair here. Some genuinely arrived. Shiny new vessels, sailing into port, cameras flashing. It looked like progress. But here's the part that still gets me. The tuna company barely caught any tuna. The boats tied up. The industry never came. And the bills kept arriving. So now we've got a fishing fleet that doesn't fish, a security force with nothing to secure, and $2 billion of debt propped up on a lie. And every hidden loan is really just a bet, that nobody important ever adds up the full number. It's a bet that always, eventually, loses. Because a secret this expensive leaves a trail, and someone always follows it. For almost 2 years, the numbers stayed buried. The bankers kept smiling. The machine kept humming. And then, in April 2016, one person finally saw the whole number at once, and everything the scheme depended on came apart. In early 2016, the hidden loans surfaced, and the reaction was instant and brutal. The IMF, Mozambique's most important lender, felt lied to. It froze everything. 14 donor countries cut the aid, keeping the government afloat. For years, this had been a crime on paper. Now, at last, the crisis reached ordinary people. The currency, the metical, collapsed. Prices exploded. Overnight, food cost more than families could pay, for a debt none of them ever agreed to. In 2017, Mozambique defaulted. It simply couldn't pay. A study by the Mozambican watchdog CIP put the total cost at around $11 billion, and nearly 2 million people pushed into poverty. 11 billion from an original 2. That's what these crimes do. The damage doesn't match the theft, it dwarfs it. Hospitals ran short, projects froze, schools waited. And the fleet, the whole reason for this. Investigators found the boats exactly where the money ended up, nowhere useful. Rusting at anchor, engines cold. So the consequences were everywhere you looked. But one question still hung over the whole country, and it's the one that haunts me most. Where did the $2 billion actually go? To answer it, an independent audit was ordered. Auditors chased the money, company to company, invoice to invoice. They followed it as far as the paper would take them, and then the trail just stopped. Because here's the part investigators still can't fully explain. Even after years of digging, hundreds of millions of dollars simply vanished. Not stolen in a way anyone could trace, not sitting in one account someone could seize, just gone. A fortune evaporated, and to this day, no one can say exactly where. It was the journalists who refused to let that stand. In a place where digging into power can be dangerous, reporters kept pulling threads. The contracts, the shell companies, the names. Piece by piece, they turned a buried scandal into a story the whole world could see. And the world started asking the same question I am. Who pays for this? We already know the answer. Not the minister, not the bankers. When the victim is a whole country, the bill lands on everyone else. And for years, it looked like the people who built this would never pay at all. The bankers moved on. The middlemen scattered. Chang kept his job, then his freedom. But money leaves a trail. And this time, investigators on 3 continents decided to follow it all the way back. In late 2018, US prosecutors made their move. Because dollars and American investors had touched these deals, they could charge it in a New York federal court. And their first target was the man who started us off. Manuel Chang was arrested in South Africa, stopped at an airport mid-journey. Then came a years-long tug-of-war over who got to try him, 2 countries pulling at once. Finally, in 2023, he was extradited to the United States. By then, the insiders were folding. The 3 Credit Suisse bankers pleaded guilty. Andrew Pierce admitted the kickbacks. The dominoes were falling. Not everyone, though. A Privinvest salesman, Jean Boustany, was tried in New York, and a jury acquitted him. I'm telling you that because the whole story includes it, and Privinvest, along with its late founder, has always denied wrongdoing, insisting the boats were real and the deals were legitimate. Then the regulators came for the giant itself. In 2021, after investigations on 2 continents, Credit Suisse agreed to pay around $475 million, and this is genuinely rare. A Credit Suisse subsidiary pleaded guilty to fraud, a global bank, admitting it in court. It even agreed to forgive $200 million of Mozambique's debt. But the scandals kept piling up for Credit Suisse. And in 2023, the 167-year-old bank collapsed, swallowed in an emergency rescue. Gone. Privinvest's founder, Iskander Safa, died in 2024, before the story fully closed. And in that, there's something telling. The debt outlived some of the men who made it. In Mozambique's own courts, a circle of insiders was convicted, including the son of a former president. And Chang? In August 2024, a New York jury found him guilty of fraud and money laundering. Months later, 8.5 years in prison. So, on paper, justice arrived. Bankers punished, a bank humbled, a minister behind bars. But follow the money one last time, and the ending isn't satisfying at all, because prison doesn't refill a treasury. A guilty plea doesn't restock a clinic. By the time anyone paid, the money, most of it, was already gone. Chang would serve his sentence in a cell. The country would serve a longer one, poorer than before, paying off a debt its people never signed. Both those men's stories have endings now. Mozambique's doesn't. It just turned the page to a new chapter, the one where it pays. The debt got restructured, stretched over years, handed to a generation of Mozambicans who were children when those papers were signed. The gas is finally flowing now, the very fortune the whole scheme was betting on. But so much of that future is already promised to old debt. They borrowed against tomorrow, and tomorrow arrived already mortgaged. So let me leave you with the thing I can't stop thinking about, the thing that makes this the perfect capital crime. Nobody robbed a bank, nobody fired a gun. They signed 4 pieces of paper, and 2 million people paid the price. That's the truth about the biggest financial crimes. They don't look like crimes, they look like paperwork. The boats are still out there, rusting in that harbor. Ask what they really cost, and the honest answer isn't a number, it's a country's future. But here's the unsettling part. This wasn't the biggest financial crime we've uncovered, not even close. This is capital crimes. We follow the money, because somewhere, right now, the next billion-dollar scandal is already unfolding. Subscribe, and when the trail appears, you won't miss where it leads.